The new 2023 F1 season is fast approaching, and it means that we're truly in launch season. Most teams have launched their new 2023 cars, and so let's take a look at the top 3 teams and see how their cars compare. Mercedes launch. We should start this off by taking a look at each car individually, with the Mercedes being the most recent to launch. When the W14 was revealed, it was great to see that Merc went back to black with the livery. I don't know about you, but I personally much prefer the all-black livery. The launch itself was a good indication that George Russell and Lewis Hamilton are ready to get back to challenging for the title. Lewis said that we've redesigned, optimized and innovated so many parts of the car, and that is impressive. You would hope that the team can improve from last year, and there was a lot of optimism at the launch. Team boss Toto Wolff said, "Our hopes and expectations are always to be capable of fighting for a world championship." But he did admit that the team are not exactly where they want to be, explaining that, however, our competitors were very strong last year, and we are playing catch-up. The W14 has to be one of the best-looking cars on the track this season, and it will be interesting to see whether it can return to being one of the fastest. While Mercedes kept their cards close to their chest when it came to zooming in on the finer details, there are certainly some interesting design points on the car. Ferrari launch. The other two teams did not have massive changes to their liveries, with Ferrari obviously going with red as their primary colour. The Ferrari still looks really good, and it's very nice to see the big Ferrari on the rear wing, the traditional look of a Ferrari F1 car. The Ferrari is always a good-looking car, and you can't really go wrong with a Ferrari livery, considering the history of the team. You just gotta hope that the restructuring within that team should iron out some of the issues Ferrari had last year. Sainz said, "We'll push each other until the end for sure." Seeing as the car is pretty similar to last year, the interesting part of the launch was the comments from Sainz and Leclerc. It seems like the pair are ready to push each other throughout the season, with the team hoping it doesn't hurt them. Red Bull launch. Much like the Ferrari, the Red Bull is stuck with the same sort of livery, with Red Bull rarely changing from their original livery. If you missed it, you might think that Red Bull just launched the exact same car as last year. I mean, it did work pretty well last year. But despite no change in the livery, there is still some interesting design points for this car. But it is clear that Red Bull are not focused on how their car looks, with Max Verstappen's comments proving the team are substance over style. The Dutchman said, "To be honest, I haven't seen it," adding, "I haven't seen any pictures or renders because I'm not interested in these kinds of things. I only want a fast car and it doesn't matter how it looks to me." Red Bull's big announcement. The push for performance was why Red Bull announced that they were partnered with Ford for the 2026 season onwards. It was a huge announcement from the team. Hardly surprising when you consider how much money Honda must have been spending on creating the Red Bull engines. The team stole the headlines at their launch when they announced a major partnership with Ford from 2026 onwards. It's pretty cool to see one of the world's biggest auto manufacturers returning to F1, hopefully more successful than their last stint. Considering that Red Bull were the fastest car in 2022, you can't have been surprised that their 2023 reveal was exactly as expected. Sidepods. One of the parts of car design that made a huge difference last year was the sidepods. We saw Red Bull nail the design, while Mercedes did whatever the opposite of nailing it is. The Mercedes drivers were very uncomfortable in the car last year, with porpoising being a big issue for the W13. So I'm sure Lewis Hamilton and George Russell will have been thrilled to see that Mercedes have stuck with their sidepod design from last year. The no sidepod Mercedes will return for 2023, with Merc hoping that their strategy will finally bring results. I mean, no sidepod certainly did not make Mercedes fast or comfortable in 2022. It is a big risk for Mercedes going into 2023, as we don't really know whether this concept can really work in F1. It certainly didn't work last year, with many F1 experts believing that the large exposed floor area was at the root of their porpoising problems that Merc faced. I mean, I guess you could look at it that if Mercedes have stuck with the no sidepod design, then they must have come up with a genius solution to the issues they faced last year. But we have got to wait and see how these changes really affect the car. Red Bull's sticking with the same sidepods. The team thought about changing to the Red Bull style, but decided to continue to develop their sidepods from last year. I mean, that's a very risky strategy, as it could make the Mercedes look pretty silly if it still doesn't work. Technical director Mike Elliott said that, although we had problems last year, we know there is a lot of goodness in the car. They are going to need a lot of goodness from the car to catch up to Red Bull. In terms of the sidepods, it was to no one's surprise that Ferrari and Red Bull decided against copying the no sidepods design from Merc. Their drivers probably didn't want that bumpy of a ride. As Red Bull had one of the smoother rides in the 2022 season, the sidepods don't look like they're any different to last season. I mean, why fix something that isn't broken? The Red Bull was by far the fastest car in 2022, and so no point in making huge changes when you don't need to. There were certainly no visible differences when it came to the new Red Bull, and this could be different by Bahrain. Red Bull love playing the mind games of F1, with team boss Christian Horner saying, "What you've seen today obviously isn't a total reflection of what will hit the track in Bahrain in a couple of weeks' time." Ferrari's small changes to sidepods. Ferrari have also decided to stick with their design from last season, with only a couple of changes to their sidepods. The gills above the sidepods have been split into two distinct sections. While porpoising is the main issue with the sidepods, teams also need to manage cooling. The Scuderia had a fast car last year and they were able to get on top of the porpoising issues quite quickly, so there was no need for them to make huge changes to their sidepods. The little changes they have made are designed to make them more competitive. Ferrari are looking ready to challenge for the title. Shaving weight. One of the most controversial design points on all of the cars last year was the weight. Some teams were too light and some were too heavy, with Red Bull one of the teams aiming to shave off some weight for the 2023 season. A lighter chassis seems to be the key to this weight saving from last year's title winners, and this could make the car even faster than it was last year. It's pretty crazy to think that despite being comfortably the fastest car on the grid last year, Red Bull was still battling with an overweight car for large parts of the season. I mean, imagine how fast they could be this year. It's pretty scary. Mercedes' clever design to save some weight. But they're not the only team looking to shed some weight. Mercedes had the most visual change to aid weight reduction. While the black livery looks way cooler and more intimidating than the silver, the change was actually driven by weight saving. Having the livery black means some parts of the car are actually not painted. Shockingly, major parts like the front and rear wings are not painted on the Merc, instead running as pure carbon fiber except for the secondary coloring. I mean, it is pretty crazy to think that a coat of paint could be the key to Mercedes challenging for the title. Ferrari aiming for some spare weight. Ferrari had two main objectives with their design for the new car: changing the aerodynamics and reducing the weight of the car. Ferrari have had the luxury of actually having one of the lighter cars on the grid, and because of that, they're aiming to get below the minimum limit. By the sounds of it, Ferrari have been able to shave off a few kilograms from their previous car, and it means that they can react to future issues. It's actually a really smart strategy from Ferrari, as teams are often unable to adjust to changes during the season. Having some spare weight to play with means they can make changes after testing. Taking these releases with a pinch of salt. While it's incredibly exciting to finally be getting closer to the start of the new season, you've got to remember that these cars will look incredibly different when the season begins in March. For one thing, teams often like to be very creative with the images they release for the cars, often missing major details. There are often huge changes made in between when the cars are released and when they actually head out on track for the very first time. Just last year, it took until pre-season testing for us to see Mercedes' no sidepod design. All of the cars will look different when they get onto the track. F1 teams are very sneaky, and don't be surprised if they've released a car which looks very different to the one that is actually released. How can you not be excited that the F1 season is fast approaching? We could actually have a three-way title battle, and I cannot wait to see it. If you want to keep up with all the thrilling F1 action coming up over the next few months, why not scroll down and hit the subscribe button? If you enjoyed the video, click that like button and we'll see you next time.